Jim, thanks so much for being here. If you don't mind introducing yourself and taking the stage, that would be great. I think we've got you muted, Jim.
Thanks, Taylor. Appreciate the introduction and great to be with you, and appreciate the opportunity to have met a few folks in the breakout room there. I had a collection of Salt Lake City people. You're all ganging up on me. I felt a little threatened there, but good to meet everybody. Response Marketing Group is the firm which I represent. I'm CEO. We just celebrated in October our 38th anniversary. We are a data boutique in a very simple definition. We started back in the late 80s when there were only two marketing channels, telemarketing and direct mail. And our value proposition from a data perspective was working predominantly with financial services clients to help them understand who the target audience was. Well before a digital environment that we now operate in, direct mail was one of the few below the line channels that you could really utilize. And so we built predictive models for clients that were looking to cross-sell, upsell, and acquire customers with things like home equity lines of credit and credit cards. So that was where we really cut our teeth. That was the outset of us building a normative database, which I'll come back to and is incorporated in our conversation here about one of the things that makes us unique. In the 90s, we ended up migrating over into travel and tourism. We were asked by the Disney companies to help them to identify target audiences for selling timeshare, back when you could call it timeshare in the mid-90s. They viewed timeshare basically as an opportunity to sell the same mortgage 52 times. And so as they expanded outside of Orlando to build new properties, they wanted to identify households that might be interested. And so we overlaid predictive analytics, and that was our launch into travel and tourism. In 2019, we really set out to try to solve what many feel is the holy grail of advertising and marketing, that is kind of response attribution, right? So there's above the line advertising, radio, TV, outdoor. There's below the line advertising, direct mail, social, targeted campaigns. So we have been trying to help our clients understand what true response attribution is and how to measure return on investment. And so my presentation today is going to focus on ad technology that exists in the marketplace. We have a proprietary offering, but we obviously have competition, and this isn't meant to be a sales pitch. It's really trying to hopefully educate everybody on what is the technology that exists out there beyond Google Analytics that allow you to truly measure return on ad spend, and also better understand who those folks are besides what Google Analytics tells you is your aggregate site visitor. So there you go, Taylor.
Awesome. Thanks, Jim. Appreciate the background there.
Yeah, so I'll jump in and try to keep a close watch on our time. And hopefully I don't gloss over these too much, but I know that we'll have some time for questions and obviously some follow-up potentially afterwards. So really talking about what we do. Many of you might have seen this quote, which is now a number of years old. Data is the new oil. And I'm not sure it's not more relevant now than it ever was. Gentleman Clive Humby was a mathematician in England, coined that phrase back in 2006 with the understanding that data was becoming both a commodity, but recognizing that to make it effective, you really had to mine data, just like you had to drill and mine, if you will, for oil. That being said, I'm sure we probably all recognize that data is incredibly valuable, especially a lot of the folks that are deeply embedded in delivering digital products and services. McKinsey did an analysis last year and queried the Fortune 1000 directors of marketing, and 76% of them said that they are not effectively using data on online marketing and targeting. And so, what are the practical applications? Despite the fact we all know better, we're probably not using it to the level that we can or should. So when we consult with clients, it's really ad tech, which is a broad definition. So we're going to focus on one aspect of ad tech today. Ad tech really is about, how do we better use the data that we have to target individuals? How do we build customer segments and profiles, whether that's in a B2B or a B2C environment? We have extensive experience, and our peers do as well, using ad technology for both applications. Recognizing that our goal is to serve our audiences the most relevant ads, which are going to lead to a higher open or click through and potential purchase behavior. And not the least of which is to maximize profits, which are driven by increasing the efficiency of your ad campaigns, whether those are traditional or digital or whatever channel. When we talk about ad tech today, in my comments, I guess here, it's really focusing on advertising that you may be doing across one of these platforms, right? Search, which I think 97% of small businesses and large are doing today. Display advertising, video and CTV, which is connected TV, if you're not familiar with the term CTV. So connected TV is looking at things, using things like YouTube and other channels. Mobile, SMS, and text messaging. Email, which has grown exponentially in the last dozen to 15 years, and then social in a broad category, regardless of the particular platform, but social as a whole. So we're gonna touch on ad tech and the implication with that. What I would encourage all of you, hopefully, to walk away from in this exercise is not exclusively on the ad tech and what ad tech does for you, but really the fact that you should be demanding of yourselves, of those in your organization that are running marketing, and from your marketing partners, hard data on how ads are working for you, regardless of whether you're deploying ad tech or whether you're more traditional. It's which ads are generating the highest yield. You should be measuring that with every campaign that you initiate. What type of ad or channel is most successful? Meaning that of these different channels we look at above, most of our clients, when we initiate a relationship, they are doing a little bit of what I call the Tinkerbell strategy, and that is that we're sprinkling a little bit of Tinkerbell dust on all these channels and hoping that one of them is going to turn out to be the most effective. You really need to hold your marketing partners, your marketing organization internally accountable for understanding the performance of each of these channels. And hopefully today you walk away with a sense that ad tech can help you do that in a somewhat simplified way. And then which of your channel partners allows you to fully monetize your ad spending best? I'm all for doing a little bit of sprinkling across a lot of channels in a test environment, but ultimately we want to get to a crawl, walk, run where you might say social works exceptionally well for us and video and connected TV does not. So we tested it. I put 10% of my budget there, but it really didn't work for us as well as we had hoped that it would. And then reallocating that budget to those channels that are the highest performing. Little bit of history for those that think that Google Analytics has been around since the dinosaur age. It's still a relatively new technology. Analytics was launched by Google in 2005. Showed you a couple of the logos as they have transformed over the years. We're now at Google Analytics 4, GA4, which is a fabulous tool. And my comments today are not meant in any way to denigrate it. It's dated, and it only represents aggregate anonymous data. Where we are in the world today allows you to go beyond aggregate anonymous data. Here's a collection of a number of logos. My guess is that maybe 90%, if not 100% of these you've never heard of before, which is no surprise. But I present them so that as you rewatch the recording, you've got some names of some individuals and companies that you can reach out to. RMG is in this mix, but I wanted to be very unbiased in letting you know there's a lot of different companies in the space that are deploying ad technology of some sort using either anonymous location tracking or de-anonymized location tracking. I mentioned earlier, RMG back in 1986 started to build out a normative database. So we have about 220, a little less actually. We have about 200 million. There's a little north of 220 million US households when we exclude minors, people 17 and under. And what we have been compiling is a publicly available database. And you can see in the bullets here what some of those resources are, right? So for those of you that are going to be a little shocked in terms of the eye-opening side of, oh my gosh, I didn't know that was publicly available information, but it is. So a real estate transaction is publicly available information where I can learn what the value of your home is. If you filled out that form and I pursue it further, I can find what you listed as your salary. So there's a lot of public information that we're scraping from sources like tax records, county and city records, registrations for all types of events, surveys that you have either filled out personally or been a part of, opt-in email, where we're capturing email addresses, mail responders in the sense of traditional mail responders. So if you're a charitable donor to an organization, that information is public, and the amount that you've given is public, as is voter information public. Subscriptions. So there are a variety of different sources that sell subscriptions to magazines. So if you read Food and Wine, or you read Golf Magazine or whatever, those subscriptions are publicly available. And then warranty information is resold. So when you purchase a new appliance and you list your occupation and the age range and the income range, all of that is input into a database. And so what we do, as do almost all of our peers in the industry, we're talking about CCPA, GDPR compliant information publicly available. We are not talking about PII. And so when people say, as I go further into this, how can you possibly do that? It's because it is publicly available information, or when we're talking about apps, and I'll show you that in a minute, or web browsers, you have consented for your device to be tracked. And that's how we find out who you are and the demographic information on you. So what type of information are we collecting, and what are we collecting it from? We're collecting it from mobile devices. So routinely, if you use Waze, if you're familiar with that GPS product, if you stop at a red light and you notice all of a sudden when you're stopped at that light, there's an ad for the McDonald's that's cat-a-corner from the light that you're sitting at, you have been caught inside of a mobile frame that's pushing you an SMS text ad based on some set of criteria, or the sheer fact that you have geolocated yourself inside that frame. In-store speaks for itself. When you are in a retail store, or you are at an event, a concert, a theater, whatever, we are capturing information on your movement behavior and who you are. And website, we'll dig into a little bit more deeply, but whether or not you register, we place a pixel in the header of a website, and it allows us to de-anonymize a website visitor using a proprietary IP to geolocation match. Why and what are we doing with it, right? So what we're doing is you may have a CRM in your company where you've got Jane Smith's name and you've got an email address, or you may have a terrestrial address, but that gives you kind of a fuzzy image of who Jane really is, where all marketers are getting to today, and especially retailers. Take Amazon as a prime example. Understanding what your purchase behavior is, what your self-reported interests are based on that purchase behavior, and creating an identity graph of exactly who is Jane. What year was she born? What is the email address associated with her account? What are her interests? How many kids does she have? All publicly available information. The first way that's done in RMG's particular case is by building geoframes. So these are polygons. They're not necessarily shaped by this square, but it's a great simple visual for you. And that is, when that mobile device walks inside that frame, we identify who you are. That's occurring at almost all sporting arenas and events and concerts now. That information is being tracked. If you have provided consent when you downloaded an app that you could be tracked, you agreed to location tracking, then we are tracking you. I say we in the industry, not RMG specifically. And so where that device goes is being tracked by someone. Whether that device is being de-anonymized is a different case. But the movement data of that device is being tracked and resold. The second part is a product we have called Smart Pixel. What it does is it places a header in your website using a line of code. We also provide unsubscribe information, which is part of what's required from a compliance perspective, where you can unsubscribe to being tracked, We're all familiar with those pop-ups that come the minute that you're now landing on site. 87% of US sites all now have those compliance pop-ups. Deloitte ran an analysis at the end of 2023. Actually, 82% of people do nothing with that pop-up. So that's operating under implied consent. If you do not opt out to be tracked, then you are being tracked. How are we using the data? In the case of Smart Pixel, we are working with our clients to understand who's coming to the website, as well as with geoframing, who's visiting in person, who came to that outdoor festival that spanned a 3-day weekend. How often are they inside that frame, and what kind of behavior are they demonstrating? Did they come once? Did they come 3 times? How long did they stay? All of that information is being captured, both on the website and in person. Our clients are using that to basically collect and monetize it. So, my question to you going forward is, what type of visitor inquiry data have you collected, if any, over the years, whether that's using these technologies or that's just simple aggregation of customer data or site visitor? So someone comes to your website, fills out a form, requests information. Are you recording that information by their name, by their request, by date, all of that? Understanding what you have and what you do not have. What you don't have is probably more important than what you do have, because that helps you to understand, how do we engage with these individuals at that personal level? And then how can you use all that data, obviously, to improve your marketing? I share this quick snapshot of the types of reporting that we're delivering back to our clients, right? So this is an example of a client where in this particular month of August, we saw 39,000 visitors that we were able to de-anonymize. Of those, 15,000 were unique individuals when we removed duplicate visits. We track month by month what behavior, and you can see in the upper right here, what is the percentage of demographic matches that we have on key demos. So we're matching age, income, net worth, whether there's children present, marital status, and whether or not we've got an email address, right? And where it really gets interesting is we know what their click behavior is. So if you do any type of targeted advertising and you have UTM codes or strings inside your ad campaigns, we're actually able to match at that level who those individuals are. And I know this is hard to see, so apologies. It's a little bit of an eye chart, but trust me when I tell you, we can associate an individual. So as we look at these numbers, just for example purposes, this is a client of ours, the Palm Beaches, one of the tourism entities in Southeast Florida. This particular ad campaign that they're running, we could go into the data and we can identify who those 10,795 people are by name. So in wrap up, whether you have what we call a digital shoebox, which is not a sophisticated CRM or a database, but you're collecting just information from inquiries or inbound requests, or whether you have built a formal database, all of this can be done. You don't have to have spent a lot of money, right? The reality is, as we look at a visitor's journey, there are literally millions of companies in the United States spending anywhere from $1,000 a month to $100,000 a month on targeted advertising. If we look at the customer journey, whether it's in a B2B or a B2C environment, it starts with gathering input and information and goes on the rest of the way, all the way through, hopefully, a purchase. In this case, the example is in the tourism industry, where people, like all of us, gathering information, deciding where do we want to go on our next vacation. But how do you overlay the touch points of that experience based on their site behavior or their in-person behavior? And where do I engage with them based on the right messaging at the right time with the right offer for the right audience? So the technology exists across the space entirely. My, I guess, takeaway for you all would be, these 5 things very quickly. Start with clean data, meaning that if you've got data and it's 10 years old, it's probably not clean data, so it's good to get that refreshed. There's a lot of ad tech out there to help you build visitor segments, but you can do it without using ad tech, so that's not necessarily a requirement to get in the game. I would advise you to look at developing some amount of true response attribution, understanding where your leads are coming from as you're testing a lot of these channels, especially in a digital environment. that should help you validate the right places to spend your money. And if you've got funding sources, being able to go back and saying, hey, here's how we measure return on ad spend, which hopefully allows you then, depending upon what industry you're in, to attract and retain sponsors and partners and get additional insight. Real quick look at a couple case studies. We've been fortunate to work with the Ritz-Carlton. If I had asked anybody here 15 years ago, if you saw a Ritz-Carlton ad, what did it look like? It was typically a white 60-year-old couple together. We did analysis to understand exactly who comes to Ritz-Carlton, both stays and comes to their website. And we found that 72% of their site visitors have a child 17 or younger in the household. So we suggested that they start showing kids in their ads. This is an example of one that they rolled out a couple years ago. Nothing but kids. They now offer surf lessons at certain locations, and it led to incredible results. Increase in click to open rates and click-through rates from 12% to 32%. Engagement went up 30 to 35%, and revenue at the high end in some of their segments was up 55%. In another industry, veterinary care, we did analysis to understand, based on survey data and the number of dogs and cats that were owned by individual, that people see themselves as their animal. They humanize pets. And so we felt like the best way to humanize someone to come visit the vet and to continue to use vet services, because in COVID, we saw a lot of people that, because they couldn't get into their vet, stopped going to the vet, and who suffered was the pet. And so we created a social campaign all around creating the human aspect to pets. So silly stuff, silly examples, but it really allowed the engagement to go off the charts. This particular client, which owned about 100 different veterinary clinics across the US, increased revenue by $500,000 with one simple social campaign. So couple last metrics for you that when you watch the recording probably will be more helpful, and that is that there's a number of data points here that reinforce the fact that relevance and customer insight help drive response. And so I would encourage you to think about ad tech. It is not an expensive proposition. There are quite a few folks in the space now, and it is getting more populated. So the barrier to entry is low, both in terms of availability and cost. So with that, Taylor, I have to catch my breath.
Thank you very much. That was so interesting. Awesome. I love it. So if you have questions, please throw them in the chat. We can start a queue there, and would love to get your questions in there. I'm just making sure I have it open so I can follow along. But if you have a question right now, feel free to unmute yourself. Otherwise, Jim, I'll ask them. Shoot, go ahead, Faiz.
This is Faiz here. So James, this is a very interesting product because I think it brings us one step closer to the target customer who is visiting our site. But do you show real-time information of the person visiting on the website so that we can open the chat window and have a quick conversation with that person immediately? Do you think the tech has advanced to that level yet?
It has. We don't do that because in our initial kind of analysis, because the technology off the bat is already found to be a little spooky by people, that's really more of kind of a retail chat-driven engagement. We were doing it for marketing purposes and profiling.
Okay, thank you.
Jim, what is a major mistake that you see people making as they start executing some of these strategies you discussed? What are some pitfalls that people should avoid?
I think that a lot of times folks can take, let's just say, a month's worth of data, because typically our clients want 30 days worth of data aggregated. They can access it, 24/7, but they're like, okay, let's look at, what December's data look like, is to make maybe spurious correlations right off the bat to say, this is representative of all of my audience. We find that it does take a number of months to combine data and look at trends, and it provides a greater portrait of who your site visitors are. The great thing about digital advertising, I think, Taylor, is that it allows us in the matter of literally hours up to, a week to measure a test campaign we might put out there, right? So because we're in the tourism industry, a lot of our clients will say, we think Baltimore's a great feeder market for us, so we're going to drop an ad campaign in Baltimore to try to, incentivize XYZ. And yes, you can get early response in 24 to 48 hours, but some of these things have a longer tail. And so we encourage clients to continue to accumulate the data, continue to interrogate the data on a regular basis, but I wouldn't jump to conclusions just based on a day, a week, or 30 days. It's good to look at trends. Some of our clients have businesses that certainly have seasonality. And over the course of a year or longer, they start to see, yep, we now have enough data to understand what our slow months are, and we shouldn't freak out because we're not getting as many matches or as much site traffic because people just don't visit us. So.
Let's see. Can you review the tech stack or the tools that you would suggest someone just starting out should get, like the first couple of tools or the first pieces of software that people should be looking at or using in their first foray into this?
Well, I'm always surprised by the number of folks that run marketing in mid-sized to smaller organizations that don't fully understand Google Analytics. And since it's been just the de facto measurement tool that we have available, and I'm no expert in it by any stretch of the imagination, but I encourage folks to, with all of the different assets that Google has available, better understand just how analytics works and what you're actually tracking. Because I find when we go back to clients, a lot of times they'll say, well, the numbers that you're able to track in terms of our site visitors are way below what Google Analytics is. And so the way some people count duplicate visits, or there's an inclusion of spiders and bots and other things to inflate your number. And so understanding exactly what Google is tracking, understanding the identification of each of those devices is really important. So that's number one. Number two, I don't think that you need to be, super ultra sophisticated. So a lot of folks, in when they start talking about building out a data set, for example, I can't afford Salesforce. Salesforce is great, but you don't need to afford Salesforce, right? I mean, we have small clients that we encourage simply to use create Excel spreadsheets of data that they've aggregated, inbound requests. So just truly crawl, walk, run. I am not a data technologist. Fortunate to have folks on our team that are. From our perspective, it's just understanding what is all the data that you have access to, how to best deploy that data, and some can certainly be overkill. So I don't think that, you don't have to have a PhD in data analytics to understand how to do some of these things and do some baseline data mining, and start to build out some segmentations and some profiles. And from that, use it to inform the marketing that you're deploying, especially if it's in a targeted digital environment.
That's helpful. Thank you. I don't know who it is. They put, and maybe I missed the context on here, the last question in the chat. This is great, but can't do it itself. What else is key to driving this successfully? I didn't see when that came in, so I don't know what the context is. If you want to unmute yourself.
Yeah. Hey, Taylor. Just mainly like the tech is great, but obviously there's things you have to do to use it successfully, whether that's, understanding your target market, having the right type of, sales strategy, other tech to support it. The other gentleman asked about technology. There is chat bots and tech out there that you can track them live and kind of intercept the prospect as they're looking on your website. But I guess, yeah, what else would you say is key to before implementing, your tech and strategy? What would the client have to have or know? Like, what would be one key thing you'd say they'd have to parse out before engaging with you guys?
Yeah, so somebody on my team actually responded to a question that is similar. So if you look in chat here, Selena's response, and I alluded to it earlier on, I find that a lot of our clients start with data that we call is either dirty, right? So for example, they say, well, I've got 100,000 records of customers and prospects in my database. Well, when we look at it, it hasn't been deduped in a couple years, and so we find that anywhere from a low of 18% to a high of 55% of the data that many of our clients maintain when we initiate a relationship it just isn't good, meaning that it's got a terrestrial address that hasn't been updated in 5 years, or there is 25-30% duplicate records. So James Harenchar is in there, Jim Harenchar is in there, James J. Harenchar is in there, counted all 3 times. So I think just to establish an initial launching point is to make sure that you refresh your data. There are so many resources out there that do that, from prominent names that Axiom, Experian, TransUnion, all those types of companies, to small specialty boutiques that for literally pennies per name will update that data for you. So you've got a clean data set when you start. You've conducted the hygiene. You may even say, it might cost you 50 cents a name, but you can actually get email addresses appended where there is a match by a first name, last name, and a terrestrial address, because that is publicly available information that all of those different resources I just alluded to make available to you. So I think starting with accurate data, as opposed to trying to build sophisticated models off of flawed data, is probably a bad mix.
Yeah. Selena's answered a few questions in there, and they're great. Thank you, Selena. This is helpful. We've got time for one last question. If anyone has one, you can come off mute. Otherwise, I will take advantage of it more, Jim, having you here. One last question. Last question should be this: how do people get in touch with you? I saw on your website you've got the Pixel product as well as the targeting product. Sorry, I know I'm butchering these names.
Bullseye. Yep.
Bullseye. Thank you. If people are interested in those, should they be getting in touch with you, Selena, or how best should people reach out to you?
Yeah, so our web address, and we actually have something up there for this session. So if folks want to learn more about us, it's at rmg-usa.com, and then we have a / midday connect. So you can go to that specific to this session, but you can drop the Midday Connect and find us. Taylor, thank you. We do have an explanation of Bullseye and Smart Pixel, but data for us is really kind of what the foundational aspect of our focus is. And so whether it's building predictive models, helping customers do segmentation and profiling, understanding what channels they ought to deploy into, that's really where we are. We're not an ad agency. We don't do creative stuff. We're all about using data to generate that positive ROI. So.
Awesome. Looks like Selena put that in the chat as well. Thank you very much, Jim. This is fantastic. We'll share the presentation as well for those of you who have come, and really appreciate your time, Jim. I just looked up the site. Looks great for the Smart Pixel, the Bullseye, as well as the segmentation services. So thank you for putting that together. Can't thank you enough. All, thanks for coming. Really appreciate it. And we'll be here next week at the same time, same place.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tim.